You know, every once in a while something comes along in the world of bicycles and bicycle-related things that, well, you just didn't see coming. Something like this. Hey, Granny Gear here for Old Guy on a Bike on yet another Tech Tuesday video. Today we're talking about these little guys right here. This little brick of technological wonder is a small air compressor that you can use to inflate the tires on your bicycle, either for repair or just tire adjustment, etc., etc. It's battery powered, it's rechargeable, it's powerful. Well, it's all the rage. And I have a few samples of these. I'm going to be talking about them, what I think about them after using them, strengths and the weaknesses of the ones I have, and also, well, as great as these things are, they do present some, well, conundrums, some concerns I have on using these to replace all the other things we've been using, well, to put air in our tires of our bikes. All right, let's get started. You know, for the longest time, if we were out on a ride and for whatever reason we needed to put air into the tire of our bicycle, well, we pretty much had two options, didn't we? We had a little pump like this design little mini pump, and this would either fit on the bike in a bracket or, you know, tucked in a jersey pocket, ready for use. Or we had a little quick fill cartridge along with a little valve head that we would use, and between one of these two things, well, we were pretty good to go. But now along comes something like this little, well, this is the Recon Mini by VIAIR. I've got a couple other models from different brands. We'll be talking about that. But just to use this as an example, along comes one of these. And now I first remember seeing these little mini compressors. I think they came out of some Chinese factory somewhere. And it wasn't like some major manufacturer in the US or, you know, market or the West decided that, hey, we're going to make one of these and everybody's going to want one. No, it came out of some Chinese factory, and the first ones were very simple. Like this one and all the ones that I have a little LED readout gauge on them, but the first ones really didn't. They were just a little brick with a little valve, a little chuck on them that would press onto your Presta. Maybe you would do Schrader as well with an adapter of some kind. I don't know, I never had one of those. And then you'd hit a button and it would make, well, an obnoxious noise like this. Yeah, I know, that's loud. It would make a noise and it would put air in your tire, at least up until the point where the battery went dead. And I thought when I saw those, son of a gun, that's different. And I kind of wanted one. And I kind of was a little skeptical all at the same time. You know, the early models, they sometimes had some quality control issues. I have a friend that bought one for his gravel bike to take with him, and he had to get 3 of them. These are like an Amazon AliExpress level. He had to get 3 of them before he had one that actually reliably worked. So, you know, early on, I wasn't an early adopter, and I saw some issues with them, which still a concern for me, and we'll talk about that at the end. But I still wanted one. I had some reasons why I thought these were going to be great. I also thought for a lot of people, these are really, really going to be good, and certainly will replace these two things. Well, why do I think that? These work. This is a simple thing, a bicycle mini pump like this, all right? It's reliable, probably isn't going to fail, will last for years, and will keep doing what it does with just about zero maintenance. You don't have to charge this, do you? Well, what are the downfalls of this? Well, the technique involved of putting this on, now this one, to get air in your tire, this one happens to have a little, if I can get it out of here, this has a little extension hose that you can screw on the end and attach to your valve, and then you pump from a distance. Some pumps don't. The ones that don't, you're actually pressing that right on the valve and you're pumping like crazy. You can break your valve off of your wheel and then, well, then you're stuck. And the other thing with a pump like this is it takes a fair amount of hand strength and strength. And you know, depending upon who you are, pumping this up is not only tiring, might be simply very, very difficult for you. And so, well, there's the other option we've used. And that is something like a little quick fill cartridge like this. This is a 12 gram. They make bigger ones like this, a little 16 gram. And a little valve head like this that screws onto it. It pierces the compressed CO2 gas. You know how this works. And you put it on your your valve stem, whether there's an inner tube or tubeless or whatever in there, and you open the valve and psh, you know, gas comes out, fills your tire. Well, there's problems with this too. For one thing, you get about like 1 tire per cartridge. So how many of these are you going to carry? 2 probably would be reasonable, maybe just 1. That's 1 or maybe 2 flats. And then the pump, it's unlimited, isn't it? So on the other hand, it doesn't take a lot of hand strength or a lot of pumping ability to put one of these in. So that's good. On the other hand, ever seen these go wrong? They'll pierce the cartridge and it just goes everywhere, or you put it on and it doesn't go in, and more of it's coming out than it's going in, and then, you know, these can be problematic. There's a technique involved with these, and if you put all that CO2 into the air and not into the tire, you're dead in the water. So along comes these little mini pumps, and they solve quite a few problems that the other 2 options, the mini pump and the CO2 cartridge, created. However, it also introduces some issues too. Now, to begin with, this doesn't take any hand strength at all to use. It doesn't take any ability to hold a pump and push hard on it 100 times, or whatever it takes to get the amount of air in your tire. You basically, if you can hold this thing onto your valve and you can hit a button, you're going to get as much air in there as you need. So that's an advantage. Well, CO2, you might get 2 full tires. Well, with one of these, depending upon the model and whatnot, you're going to get probably at least 3 or 4 tires from 0 to, say, 60 or 70 PSI. So this, in a sense, represents maybe 3 or maybe 4 CO2 cartridges. So that's a plus. On the negatives for all of these, I'm not just singling out this VIAIR, they're all like this. They all need to be charged, don't they? Which means if your battery is dead, they do nothing. And you can only do this, use it so many times, and even if your battery is fully charged, obviously, you know, at some point it isn't going to be, and then it's useless to you until you recharge it. As well, this is a very, very simple mechanical object. Probably will work and keep working. This, well, it's electronic, it's electric, it's mechanical, it's got lots of moving parts in there that get kind of hot when you use them, and one day, depending if you're unlucky, it just might look at you with a blank stare when you push the button to turn on and say, not today, pal. So, although I'm assuming these are pretty reliable, a lot more can go wrong with this than this. And if you're taking something way into the woods, way deep in the middle of nowhere, these might be good to have. On the other hand, I wouldn't rely only on it. I would still bring something like this big old Silka gravel pump with me, because one of these will keep working, even if, well, there's no batteries in it. If I can keep pumping it, it'll keep working. Now, be that as it may, even with those concerns, I'm still a fan. And so I ended up with 3 units are sent to me by the manufacturers at no cost, no obligation. And I want to talk about them because I think they each have their strengths and weaknesses. I want to talk about some of the commonalities and some of the differences. You might see one there that you like and you can shop accordingly. I don't have any connection with any of these, and there's no benefit to me. And there's also some drawbacks of some of them. So, you know, when you go shopping, hopefully this will help you. And in a minute, we're going to look at some slides on the dimensions and the models I have. And also, I did a little test, a little bit of a torture test to see what the stuffing of these things were. And then I just used them. We'll talk about each one a little bit. To begin with, I have the Trek Air Rush. Now this is, you know, when you see something come out of some Chinese factory and there's a bunch of iterations with different names and you say, okay, that's really cute and clever. I wonder if it's any good. That's kind of unique. Okay, that's fine. But when you see someone like Trek come in and say, we're going to have one of these made with our brand on it, you know, this has hit the mainstream. The Trek Air Rush is quite nice. It's the smallest and lightest of the 3. I'll put up some slides here that have the dimensions of the 3 that I have. And the Trek is the lightest and the smallest, just very, very, very slightly. I also have, as I was showing you, this is the VIAIR Mini Recon. It's the middle weight of the 2 in weight. It's just slightly heavier than the Trek, quite a bit lighter than the next model, and that is the Topeak E-Booster Digital. And as far as size goes, the Trek is just slightly smaller than the VIAIR and the Topeak E-Booster Digital. Well, it's kind of the large Marge of the three of them. All of these have about the same rating as far as how much air they can put, how many times in a certain size tire. I put a slide up on the screen saying that, you know, for a 700 by 28 or 700 by 30 tire to 60 or 70 pounds, it'll do it, you know, 3 times, etc., etc. They're all actually pretty close in the expectations. They also pretty much all come with a little storage pouch like this. It'll have the accessories that come with it. I think the Trek has the best pouch of all. It's large enough to actually put everything inside without cramming it. It has a zipper pull, which is nice. The other ones are more like little dangly soft bags, and I think that's less great. All of these come with a little attachment hose that allows you to replace where the air chuck is. When I say the air chuck, I'm talking about this part that interfaces with the valve. Like this is the chuck right here on this one. On the Topeak E-Booster Digital, the chuck is non-removable. It actually is built into the compressor itself. They all come with this little adapter hose, which allows you to do, well, a couple of things. One is it gives you some flexibility. If you're in an awkward situation, you can kind of reach in with a hose and look at the gauge, you know, while you're doing the work. That's nice. But also, you notice on here there's a little warning label. You can't read it probably. It says hot. That's because these air compressors, as they're running, generate heat, not only just internally, but the air coming out is very hot. It's just part of the way they work. So if you're pushing this onto a Presta valve, it'll heat up the Presta valve because it's just conducting heat into the valve, which is really not that big of a deal unless you're using a TPU tube, especially with a plastic valve stem. If your TPU tube has a plastic valve stem and you've been maybe using something like this for a little while, the duration of your inflation, some reason is taking a while for whatever reason, you could get it hot enough, transfer enough heat into the valve to actually affect the integrity of the valve stem of your spare tube. That's not good. A hose like this, which works with the VIAIR and all the other little units I have here, it basically gives you a zone where it doesn't transfer heat near as much into your valve stem. And that is a good thing. So all these come with a little hose, all three of them that I have. They also all have a digital readout, so I can get on here. Let me turn this one on so you can kind of see the screen. They all have a little digital readout. Hopefully you can see that. That allows you to preset the pressure, the inflation pressure. And when you plug this onto your Presta valve, you know, if it's open or your Schrader, whichever one, all these do Presta or Schrader, it'll give you a reading of what the pressure is in your tire. You hit a button and off it goes. Noisy little buggers, aren't they? And then when it hits the predetermined pressure that you set on the gauge, it'll stop all by itself. And they are very, very accurate. Much more accurate you'd ever be with a hand pump or a quick fill, which is just you get what you get. Or you get what you get until you stop pumping the hand pump. So that is very cool. Accurate, easy, and repeatable. All right, so my torture test was very simple. I took a 700 by 30 road bike tire on my Time 80HX, which measures 32, pretty close to it. So it's a decent poofy road tire, tubeless. I dumped all the air out of it, pulled, bled it out and then pulled the core, so zero pressure in there. And then I took each one of these mini pumps and I wanted to see how many times I could go to 60 PSI, right, before it ran out of battery or stopped for some other reason or whatever. See how long it would take. And I did that for every one of the pumps. And the results were, well, quite different between the three. To begin with, I started with the VIAIR. I started with the Mini Recon. It took that from 0 to 60 PSI 4 times. Now, by the end of the fourth one, it was starting to slow down a little bit, but it got it there, and it did it actually very well. No complaining. It has a nice, it just sounds like it's not struggling in any way. It was working really well, and by the end of the fourth one, I was in the red with the battery, but it hadn't, just like died in the middle of the process. So pretty impressive, and really that set the standard. The next one was the Trek Air Rush. Now I went to one, did it one time, did it 2 times, and by the third time, it didn't quite make it. It got to 50 something pounds, and then the battery went to red and it just shut off. Interestingly enough, where the VIAIR, the Recon, sounded like it was just like an industrial machine. It was just going, This was making some noises that had me thinking it wasn't really happy. These all get hot, and as this got hotter, and they're all going to get hot as you use them, especially during the kind of test I'm doing, which really doesn't reflect reality. I mean, when are you going to just do that with a tire somewhere out in the middle of the road where you're just going to pump it up to full pressure 4 times in a row or 3 times without stopping? Probably not going to do that, right? So I understand that, keep that in mind. But I wanted to push them, see what they do. The Trek was making some fairly ugly little chinga noises, like something in there wasn't really happy about it. And like I said, it only didn't quite make it to 3 times to 60 PSI. However, it did it. It just didn't do it as much and as well as the VIAIR, okay? Now the Topeak, that was the last one that I used. It's the biggest one, and I kind of expected this thing to be kind of a workhorse, because what's the size about, right, if not that? And it actually had that good quality sound that the VIAIR had. It just didn't sound like it was struggling. You know, it's running, it's doing, it's fine. But what surprised me was I didn't finish 2 inflation cycles with this. Why? Wasn't battery, wasn't because it failed or quit. It seemed to be happy humming along and would have done, I think, 2, 3, maybe even 4. It got hot enough to hold, okay, that I was uncomfortable holding it before I finished 2 inflation cycles. So I didn't even get to 60 PSI the second time. I just didn't want to hold on to it anymore. It wasn't burning me, but it was just uncomfortably hot, which kind of surprised me because yes, I could feel the heat through the Trek. It was getting pretty hot as well. The VIAIR, the case of it, actually was just barely more than warm. Very comfortable to use. But the Topeak, well, honestly, under the torture test situation, which like I said, isn't really real case use, I just didn't want to hold it anymore. So, something of note. Now, I used every one of these, and I think I have some thoughts on what I liked and didn't like about each model, if there is such a thing. And I'm going to give out some awards. So, beginning with the Trek Air Rush, it gets my award for the best jersey pocketable one. It's noticeably lighter in hand and is slightly smaller in its physical size than any of the others. Now, you see it's got 2 chucks on it. You go, does it go either way? No. All this is a storage point. This is a blind threaded hole on the side. This is the Schrader valve, and it's just a way to keep it in case you're out there somewhere and you need to do, Presta or Schrader, switch it over. I didn't put that on there. I just kept that in the bag. I kept it with the Presta because no one I know or I ride with has a Schrader valve on their bike. It's tidy. It's light. I have no doubt that this will fix a flat for you out there somewhere. Although it didn't do so well in the test, that was kind of an extreme use scenario. When I just use this just as you would normally do to maybe top your tires up or pump something up, I helped some people fix a flat with that with one of these. It worked just fine. And the advantage of the Trek as opposed to all these other ones, especially something like off an Amazon, some Chinese labeled brand, etc. Well, it's Trek, isn't it? So you buy this, and if there is a problem with it, well, your Trek store might be right down the street or somewhere in the next town. But some of the more Chinese direct brands, if you have a problem with them, well, you're sending emails out, aren't you? So I like the Trek Air Rush. I did. Although it did bother me a little bit, it didn't seem as burly as far as the noises it was making, and however, I think it's still a compelling little unit, and I'd recommend it. So next we have the Topeak E-Booster Digital. It's certainly larger, isn't it? And it has a lovely little silicone case cover on it, which is nice because that helps it maybe stay in your pocket if you're and it keeps it from getting scratched and marred up if you have it in like a bike case or something. And that's kind of nice. It has the chuck. It's kind of interesting. There's a little switch, if you can see it on the top here. This little rocker switch kind of slides back and forth here. And it's either Presta or Schrader all in the same chuck without having to unscrew anything and screw anything in. And that's pretty cool. If you have if you're using this across the family of bikes, you got some kids' bikes, maybe your wife's bike, and they're all from casual sidewalk bikes to your high-end road bike or gravel bike or whatever. That's a pretty cool feature and function. It's one less thing you have to lose somewhere or forget to have with you, and I think that's a pretty cool feature. The negative to this, to me, is If you're going to put this in a jersey pocket, it's the biggest and the heaviest. If you're going to put it in a small tool bag, it's the biggest and the heaviest. However, it did have a quality feel to it. When it was running, it sounded good. And so I don't think it's bad, but I'm not sure if it's my favorite either. This one is my favorite. This is the VIAIR Recon Mini. Now VIAIR, if you've never heard of them before, it's an established company. It's a US company, and what they do is they make like commercial level air compressors. Small ones that'll fit in a little case, everything from a hobbyist to a contractor type of use. I don't know how big they get. It's not really my world. I know VIAIR from supplying portable or 12-volt air compressors. You can either mount, hard mount on your like your Jeep or your overlanding rig, and you can take out there in the middle of nowhere and air up your tires for your Jeeps and your trucks and whatnot. That's how I know VIAIR. Quality stuff. This is their first foray into anything bike, and so the Recon Mini says right on there, VIAIR bike. And when I first saw this at the trade show at Sea Otter, I'm like, wow, look at that. It has a significant feel to it. It looks very well made. One of the standout features is the chuck. Remember I said the chuck is the part that presses on the valve? Okay, I'm going to unscrew this. While most chucks are maybe aluminum or maybe they're a little rubber covered, tiny, small thing, you know, this is solid brass. Well, actually it's two pieces of solid brass screwed together. I'll show you that in a second. That's a chunk. That's a chunk of precision machine metal. And you know, brass is expensive, right? Also, put this down for a second. Also, I'm going to unscrew it. It unscrews in half. There's a big old fatty O-ring in there. So the O-ring is what's providing the seal from the chuck to the valve. Now that's going to wear out over time as you do use these enough. This is rebuildable. I just unscrew it, get myself another fatty O-ring. I haven't checked with VIAIR whether they can supply that or it's just simply a number O-ring you can go get at a hardware store. Probably is. And then back together and then back into the unit. And along with the Trek, they also are both sealed right here, okay, on the body of the unit itself instead of just a little O-ring that might wear out. And that's important because if that starts leaking, the air isn't going into your tire, it's just going everywhere. Oh, I almost forgot. On the bottom of this, see that little light lit up? There's a little light on there you can turn on. You use one of the buttons, one of the up and down buttons. If you double click it, you get a little flashlight. The Trek is a little bit different. It actually, the light comes on as long as the pump is running. So these both give you a little idea. Let me turn this light off before I run the battery down. That gives you a little bit of visual help if you're out in the dark and you need to find out where that valve is, get air in it. That's pretty cool. So for me, it just felt like a ton of quality. It was also the one that just crushed the inflation from 0 to 60 test. It did it 4 times until the battery finally ran, and it never sounded like it was struggling. Very, very impressive. Now, the biggest negative I have to this is also one of the positive. This big brass chuck adds a lot of weight to this, and it would probably be lighter than the Trek if it wasn't for this. I don't know, I didn't weigh it that way because you can't use it without this, can you? So it also makes it kind of a big clunky thing, more so than it would be if it didn't have this piece of brass on there to put in your jersey pocket or to stuff in some pack. That said, it is still my favorite. I'm willing to take the weight hit and a little bit of bulkiness that this adds because I think this thing, based on my using this, it's become my favorite one to use. I think this thing is going to run forever. And if it doesn't, well, VIAIR is a company that you can just pick up the phone or send them an email, and they're in the US and they'll say, hey, we can help you with that. One more thing to mention that I find a little conflicted about with all of these little brick air compressors. And that is, where do you put them? Okay, where do these go? Now, a mini pump, that'll fit into my jersey pocket easy. Doesn't take up very much room, doesn't weigh very much either. Or I can get a little frame, a little bracket, right, that attaches by your water bottle, whatever, and you put it there, and it's always, always on your bike. You can't forget it unless you forget your bike too, and then, well, you don't need a pump, do you? But where do these go? Well, For me, it's been in my jersey pocket. If I'm on my gravel bike and I've got like a frame bag or big enough bag on there, well, even the Topeak's going to fit into my frame bag, as large as it is. And most of the time I've been using the Recon Mini because that's kind of my favorite. But putting this in my back pocket of my jersey, well, is there going to be some kind of bracketry come along that's going to mount them? And if so, where? I don't know where that would be on the bike. For one thing, they're not water resistant. Okay, as far as I know, no one's saying that this would be okay to put a bunch of water and grit in there. So if you put it like on the back of your seat post, you put it somewhere on your frame, where do you put this thing? How do you carry it well other than your jersey pocket? Well, maybe the market will think something up, but until now, I don't know. What I've loved about having one of these, besides the idea of being able to put air in my tire in case of a flat, is to be able to adjust tires when I'm reviewing them. Like for instance, a gravel bike, I do such a mixed surface loop, right? That I will start out with maybe 35 pounds and then mid-ride I hit the dirt, I'll drop it to 25, and when I'm back on the pavement, pull out my little Recon Mini or the Trek or the Topeak, back up to 35 and keep rolling. That's pretty cool, and that's something that I couldn't really do with this, and I didn't want to do with this because, well, you know. That's it. That's it for now. You guys have a great week and or weekend, and as always, go ride your bikes.